Would you like to live your best life possible, regardless of your imperfections? Discover cutting-edge tools and inspiration to let go of your limitations and expand your life beyond what you've ever imagined. On Imperfect Brilliance, we help you tap into your unique gifts and talents, uncovering and letting your brilliance shine. Join certified facilitator and coach Betsy McLoughlin as she delves into different areas of your life to get unstuck and create the life that is truly possible for you. Betsy has changed her life by utilizing the tools and techniques she is sharing with you. What if your willingness to acknowledge your brilliance is the catalyst to creating a new reality? When you stop judging you, what else can you create in your life and in the world? Join Betsy live every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern to create magical and joyous possibilities for an hour of laughs, questions, tips, and more. We are excited to contribute and play with you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to Imperfect Brilliance. My name is Betsy McLoughlin, and I am your host for this show. And thank you so much for joining me today as my guest, Paula Peralta. So welcome, Paula.
Hi, Betsy. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here and have a conversation with you.
Yay! So our topic today is the joy of failure. And it's so funny when it was like, kind of like, what? Wait, what? The joy of failure. So what happens if failure isn't the worst case scenario? What?
Well, I think it's, yeah, it's like, what does happen? I love that title, The Joy of Failure. When I saw that in the promo, I was so excited because it is one of those things that kind of stops you in your tracks and you're like, wait,
yeah,
those are two words that are not supposed to be together.
Yeah.
And it's like, also, it's like, what if you and failure are two other words that aren't supposed to go together? Like, they don't work together, but suddenly it is a magic that kind of stops you in your tracks. So I think when you look at failure, one of the things I always like to do is kind of take a step back from that and look at where did we decide, like at what point in our lives did we decide that failure is like the worst choice, like you said. And I know that from like a young age, we're taught to finish what you start and keep your eye on the prize, and that doesn't really give us a lot of space for like our desires to change like mid-creation, and so often we go into like we stay with something because if we don't finish it, then that's often classified as failure. Mm-hmm. And for me, when I look at it, it's like like you said, what if failure isn't the worst choice, and what if like staying with something that doesn't work for you actually is worse than failure? So it's like, what if actually this whole idea of failure is actually the trick? Like, what if that's the lie that keeps us from creating like the life, the business, the relationship, the joy that's actually possible?
Well, it's so true, and I just want to tell people a little bit about you before we dive further into this juicy question and topic. So, you guys, if you're wondering, Paula is an empowerment expert. She is an access consciousness being you and a joy of facilitator, as well as a joy of business facilitator. And she also is a co-owner in a salon, her salon in the Los Angeles area, and she's a celebrity hairstylist. So she might have a few different perspectives on this whole conversation. And Paula really is a joyful person to be around. She's just got such a fun energy. And she does believe that you can have it all. You can make money doing what you love. So, Paula, how can people find you if they're looking for more information on you?
Oh, I love that. I love that this is the beginning of the interview.
There you go. something different.
How to get better than that. So they can find me on my website, paulaperalta.com. They can also find me on Facebook at Paula Peralta, and then my Instagram. That's probably the most active platform for me. It's Care by Paula Peralta. And so it's a lot of, obviously, like you said, I own a salon, and so it's a lot of hair-focused content, but also I'll pop in classes or questions of the day, or just different tools that I'm using to cope with whatever life sometimes, whatever shows up for us sometimes. So,
awesome.
Feel free.
And you spell your last name as Peralta, right?
That is correct.
Okay, so Paula Peralta. And you guys, it is fun, and I love that you do so many different things, like so many of us do. And in that, where do you find that the joy of failure is actually a gift as opposed to what we have for so long gone with, which is the judgment of what failure is?
That's a great question. So my question is always that what if failure actually looks like staying with things that don't serve us? So we often look at failure as like we try something and then whatever our, projection or expectation of it, when it doesn't show up the way we think it's going to, like we're quick to label it a failure. And it's not really our fault because that's something that we're taught from a very young age, that like, to be achievers and, you set goals and you achieve the goals and those kinds of things. And so we're hardwired really to go and trained to have that point of view. And so that's the first place I like to start when I play with my clients is it's like, just like what I said, what if failure actually looks like staying with the things that don't serve you? And what if what we call failure is actually just changing tracks? So what if it's just actually leaping into another possibility? What if it's actually being the fun and play that we're meant to be? Because our natural state is joy. And, it's like, what if the purpose of life is to have fun? So if it's when you start to look at it and kind of rewrite, I'm going to say the definition of failure, it actually opens up a lot of possibility to like, oh, actually, it's not a failure. I'm just choosing something different now. Either way, you could always find gratitude for whatever shows up. And there's a lot of other tools that we could talk about there, but I think that's the biggest thing is like almost taking a moment to rewrite what we've defined as failure.
Well, looking at the definition of this for the show, number one is the lack of success. That is the definition that you find, in the dictionary and on the internet as to what failure is. So then it kind of has you ask the question, well, what is success? And what if we're really redefining it all or blowing it away, not even having definitions with this conversation?
Yeah, and it's so interesting because that whole idea of that's a question I've been asking actually a lot lately of myself and when I'm working with my clients is like, what is success to you? Because it is such an individual, right? It's such an individual definition because what someone else might decide or label success is something that I actually have zero desire to even participate in, work towards, or like when I reach the target, it's not at all fun for me. So it's really interesting because we, more often than not, people label success as like a certain dollar amount in the bank or like a certain size of house or a certain kind of relationship or a certain size of clothing or body type or whatever that looks like. But it's like you actually have to look at what's true for you. Like, and that's the question I ask a lot is if I were creating my reality, what would that look like? And the same question can be applied to success, but like, what does success mean to you? And if you were creating a life that was quote unquote successful, what does that look like? And being willing to actually step away from all of the projections and the expectations that, you know, the media or your family or maybe your partners or your children or whatever that looks like they're all going to have their own definitions and expectations. And again, it's in our nature to project that onto other people. So it's like you actually kind of have to step back and ask, like, what's true for me? If I were truly being me here, if I were truly creating my own reality, like, what would I choose?
Well, that's such a great question. And because if you lined up 100 people in a room and you ask them what their definition of success is, everybody's going to have a different answer, a different target, a different goal. You know, like yes, there might be some things that are similar, but it really is such an individual thing. So if we what would happen if we totally get rid of what we decided growing up success was and failure was?
And I mean, I obviously, like, I can always refer to my own personal experience, but for me, like,
Sure.
I had a very, like, traditional upbringing, and my parents, you know, had the expectation of me going to college once I graduated from high school. So I went to college, and I was actually in college for 4 years. And after 4 years, like, when I should have been getting my bachelor's degree, I actually dropped out. I hated class, and I was super depressed. Like, I just couldn't find my rhythm, and my grades suffered, and I just left, which is, for all intents and purposes, a failure, right? So from that space, I went home a failure and got a job, and that job led me to move 2 states away. I'm from Washington State originally, and I moved to California, to Southern California. The company I was working for in Washington State, their headquarters was in California, and I just needed to get out of town and move somewhere. So I didn't even have a job with that company in California, but I just was like, I can figure it out. I'll figure it out. So I packed up my old Nissan Altima and made it down, I'm sure just by the skin of my teeth, and, you know, drove to California. And I worked in that job for a little bit. The company then moved their headquarters to Texas. I didn't want to move to Texas, so I got another job. I worked that job for a few years. I got laid off again. And I then had to stop, and which, again, layoff, like, people project as, like, another failure. And then, so I ended up going to hair school. And now fast forward 10 years, I own a salon, a successful salon in Los Angeles. I have a team of wonderful people, wonderful stylists. I have a great business partner. I have a lot of really, like, incredible, I have a lot of really incredible things in my life right now. I have some amazing other businesses as well that generate revenue for me. And it's just a really great, like, I have a great life. And if you were to look back to all the things that were projected on me when I dropped out of college,
right.
like, I mean, we all know people that, you know, they experience one quote unquote failure and then they suddenly just go off the rails. But it's like, when I look at all of those experiences, like, my willingness to walk away from things is actually what has allowed a lot of the great things in my life to show up. And it is such a gift.
Well, that's the energy that, you know, even as you're talking to us about that, you know, very quick recap of what you chose, where you are in such a space of gratitude for it. And I'm sure there were bumps along the road, you know, some highs, some lows, some everything in between. And, you know, and not choosing to have any of that as a failure, that in itself is such a gift.
Yeah, for sure. And that's where, you know, I think it's one of those things where it's like, again, like I said, so many of the greatest things in my life have sprung out of, like, a supposed failure. Even when I look at, like, things like my relationships, it's really just about, like, when I look back at this, I'm like, okay, so college, like, it wasn't working for me. Like, I wasn't happy. So it's like, why would I label something like that a failure? Or when I look at, like, these other jobs, like, those weren't these, like, really fulfilling, amazing, empowering, like, that's not where I wanted to be my entire life. So, like, why would I label that a failure if it wasn't actually, like, if it created, and I learned a lot, and I was so grateful for it, and I loved the people that I met on the way. So it's not that there wasn't any benefit to it, but it wasn't, I mean, I probably wouldn't have been in those jobs for the rest of my life anyway. So why would I waste energy, like, labeling it something that actually just contributed to, like, the forward motion of my life? And so I think that's been, for me, that's the freedom from the label of failure.
Wow, that's amazing. And it actually has me looking back on, some different things that I viewed at the time as a failure. Wait a minute. Was it really a failure, or was it, just time, like you said, to change tracks and you're going a different way? Yes, you thought you were going straight, but guess what? The road is actually veering off to the right. And, what are you going to do? Are you going to choose to stay on this road and smack into the brick wall that you can clearly see in front of you? Or are you going to go to the right or the left, or, hit the brakes and choose something different? And so when you do that, it actually does open up a lot of other opportunities. And I also was miserable in college, and after a couple of years of it, I was like, you know what, this isn't working. And at the time, I did view, there was a lot of projections on me as well of, this is such a failure. Now what are you going to do? What are you going to do with your life? Oh my God. Right. And so looking at, and I don't think I've actually ever looked at it. So thank you for this conversation where I'm like, oh, wait, well, you chose that. Yes. And it was great. And I met my first husband there. And then, I could say, well, my first marriage fell apart. Well, that was a failure. Well, was it really? Because then, from there, my second marriage, is where I had my son. So if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't have my son, so like, you look at all of these things and you're like, well, was any of it a failure, or was it all just part of what life is? And all of these amazing gifts that come with life.
For sure. Yeah, definitely. And I think that's such an interesting perspective to look at, because all right, well, we got to take a quick break here, so hopefully you can hold on to that thought, and we'll start this again in just a couple. Thanks, guys, for listening to Imperfect. Stay tuned.
Free your mind with OMTimes Radio, IOM FM.
OMTimes magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. Connect at omtimes.com. OMTimes, creating a more conscious lifestyle.
The student asks the teacher, "How do I experience transformation?" The teacher replies, "When the student is ready to receive deeper answers, the student then asks, 'How do I know what deeper questions to ask?' And the teacher replies, "When the student decides to commit to a practice inviting transformation, level 2 questions will be revealed." Hi, I'm Tomas Garza, and as a teacher and host, I'm inviting listeners to enroll in the Mastery of Transformation by joining me on Decide to Transform, your bridge to level 2 answers. Tuesdays, 1 p.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio.
A social distancing tip.
Putting distance between yourself and others is critical to slowing the spread of coronavirus. So here are ways to stay in contact without the physical contact part. Call, send a text, set up a video conference, post on social media, dedicate a song on the radio. If you have symptoms of fever, dry cough, and shortness of breath, call your healthcare provider before going to their office. For more info, visit coronavirus.gov.
Let's all do our part, because we're all #AloneTogether. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Welcome back with Paula Peralta today, you guys. And do you remember what you were going to say before the break?
Probably not.
Failure.
Oh, I was going to say, because you were talking about your relationship and
yes,
how for a lot of, for that in that initial bit, you were perceiving it as a failure, and it's projected. I mean, that's, like marriage should be forever till death do us part.
That's
right?
exactly what I thought. That's what I signed up for. So when it didn't happen that way, it was a huge failure. Absolutely.
Right. So, but then it's like, when you look at it, it's like, well, did it actually contribute? Did it create a future? And that's one of the conversations that I think is so important, is that, like, you have always the capacity to choose. So we can choose happiness, we can choose joy, we can choose success. And the thing that I think sticks us so much is, and I'm going to use the example of marriage specifically, where it's like people talk about till death do us part, right? Like, that's how you know it's a success, is if you're in that relationship until you die. Which, like, really, when you hear it worded that way, it's like, is that really is that actually really fun? Does that sound fun for people? But it's like, we lock ourselves into these things of, like, it's one, like Lord of the Rings, one choice to rule them all. But the reality is, it's like, you can always make a different choice. And one of my favorite tools is, like, what if each choice is only good for 10 seconds? And after 10 seconds, that choice expires. So say I'm choosing a relationship with someone. In 10 seconds, that choice to be in a relationship with them expires. I can choose to be in a relationship with them again for another 10 seconds, or I can choose to explore another possibility. Now, here's the thing. You can always choose that same choice again, right? Like, so say I go off and I choose something else, and I'm like, actually, that's not what I desired to create. You can go back and choose the other thing if that's fun for you, or if that's what created the most, or you now have a new awareness. But it's when we, like, what sticks us is when we actually are like, no, I made this choice. I have to commit. I can't choose anything else. Like, we make ourselves victim to the choices that we made without actually acknowledging that you may have made that choice and you're not even that person anymore. So now you're making the same choice as a totally different person. So it's like, you have to give yourself space to choose something different, and space to, to get that, like, oh, maybe that's actually not what I desire to create, so let me choose something else. And that's how you actually figure out what you want to create as your life, is you give yourself space to create and choose, and allow yourself time and space to mess it up as well. Because it's like, well, really, like, we go back to that definition of failure. It's like, well, really, is it a mess up if you have a new awareness of what you actually desire to create as your life?
Yep. And, so what if you allow yourself the freedom to change?
Yeah, right? What would happen? What would happen if we were actually gentle with ourselves? And what if we actually allowed ourselves space to, to choose something different, or to realize, like, oh, I'm cute, but that may not be my best choice. So it's a good thing I'm cute. It's a good thing I'm cute, because I'm not really bright when it comes to making choices, or, you know what I mean? Like, give yourself that space to choose something different, and to say, I'm going to say, make mistakes, when it's like, really, it's not a mistake, because choice creates awareness. So as long as you're open to receiving the awareness that each choice creates for you, like, then that, to me, is what success is. Like, that's how you create a happy, joyful life. Yeah.
Well, in not going to that space of judgment, like, for any choice you've made, even if it wasn't your, greatest choice, you'd be like, oh, well, look what that look what that choice created. And like, oh, okay, well, would you like to choose something different now? And having that space with yourself of not going to the place of beating yourself up, you're so wrong, you're so horrible, you're so blah, 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 right? And you actually are like, well, what could I do now? What could I choose now? What could I create now? There's something so freeing about that. And it's along these same lines with the joy of failure. And if you allow yourself to fail, and like, how much failure could you actually have, and embrace it, as opposed to fighting against it, avoiding it at all costs, and judging everything that comes down the pike is, well, was this a success? Was this a failure? What am I doing? And categorizing it all as A or B. So if you give yourself that space of freedom to do whatever, and then in that same thing, like no matter what you do, what you choose, what you don't choose, how much you fail, how much you succeed, whatever those things are for you, if all of it is like, oh, okay, well, I get to choose again now, then what does that open up for people?
Well, I think you make a really good point of like talking about the space around it. And for me, when I look at this, so there's two things that you said that I think are really, really interesting. The first is like the amount of judgment that is often that our choices are entrenched in. So for me, when I look at choices and when I look at maybe that's not actually what I desired to create, is first looking at where instead of judgment can I choose gratitude for whatever's showing up. So whether it's, okay, I chose to be in this relationship, it didn't work out for whatever reason, and now I have a greater awareness of how I function in a relationship or what I desire in a partner. And it's like that actually, it's like where you can choose to have gratitude. In the space of gratitude, judgment cannot exist. So that is one of the key components of getting out of kind of the failure mindset that we talked about, or to getting out of the judgment of choices, because people often will stop choosing or not choose because they're afraid of failure or because they're afraid to make the wrong choice, like you said. So it's like, if you can actually stop to have gratitude, like, wow, how did I get so lucky that I actually can choose? Like, I can choose. And even if I choose something and it doesn't create what I desire, that's okay. Like, how lucky and how much gratitude can I have for me even being willing to acknowledge that I have a space to choose? And that,
go for it.
Oh, no, thank you. So, I mean, that's the other thing too that I've really been looking at a lot with my choices is the more vulnerable you're willing to be with yourself and with what you actually desire to create, the more you can actually choose with an energy of what matches the future that you desire to create. So there's two things. There's like so many things going through my brain right now. So the first thing is like, if your target, for example, is joy, so that's our natural state, right? Every choice that we make can contribute to us having joy. And it's not always linear, because we might be choosing, we might choose a job over here, and that may not linearly create joy, but it actually, puts us in touch with someone who becomes a really great friend and contribution to our lives, and we go out and we have fun and we make memories, and that creates a level of joy. Or that job, it's not always linear, so it can kind of be happening concurrently. But if everything we're choosing contributes to us creating joy, the thing that I like to think about is, like, if you close your eyes and you think about everything in your life right now that contributes joy, whether it's your business, your body, your relationships, like everything. Okay, so maybe it's only one thing right now, but it's like, okay, put yourself in the future, or, in 5 minutes, because that's what you're going to choose. Like, think about every single thing contributing to you having joy in your life. Everything, the bed that you sleep on, the neighborhood that you go, that you live in, the whatever ways you choose to move your body, the people that you surround your life with, or surround yourself with. It's like, what does that life feel like? Does it feel warm? Does it feel happy? Does it make you smile? Right? So if you have a life full of joy, like, imagine that. Like, what does that feel like in your world? And that's the benchmark. And then from that space, because you're now not worried about failure, you're actually choosing joy, and that is what your measure of success is. It's like, as you start to look at all the things in your life, you look at, okay, so if I take that job, does it actually match the energy? And again, it's not linear, but it's like, does it match the energy of the future that I desire to create? Like, does it move me closer towards that life of joy? Does it contribute to that life of joy? Same thing with a relationship, or clothes that you desire to wear, or food that you're going to eat or cook, or whatever that looks like. It's like, okay, so if I choose this, does it match the energy of the future that I desire to create? And I ask this a lot in my relationships. Like, if I choose to continue interacting with this person, does it create or decay the future, that I desire to create? If I choose this, what will my life be like in 5 years? If I don't choose this, what will my life be like in 5 years? And it's not always cognitive, but sometimes it's like, just like a gut feeling. But that's the thing, is once you get the energy of what you desire to create as your life, and you start asking questions about, does this match the energy? It's not always cognitive. It's most often energetic. But it's like, if you ask that question, like, if I choose this, what future will it create? Like, and if you ask that for everything, every opportunity, every partnership, everything, you'll never have to worry about failure, because that's not a benchmark. The joy is the benchmark.
That was so beautifully explained. Thank you so much. And so the question, if I choose this, what will my life look like? And then what do you do when you ask that question? What's the next thing that occurs for you?
So that's where, really, like, it may not always be like an actual download. Like, you may not have a picture in your brain of exactly what your life is going to be like in 5 years. If your target is a happy relationship with like a white picket fence and a blue door and 2.5 children and a dog, like, if that's your measure, like, it may not look exactly like that in your brain, but you will get the energy of that. Is like, okay, cool. So what does that feel like? Like, how does your body feel? Like, is your mind clear? Like, do you have an energy of happiness and joy in your life with that thing around you? So then it's like, when you ask, if I choose this, so say then, let's see, like, it may be, okay, if I choose to take a trip, or actually I'll choose to take a job, or a relationship even. So say I'm seeking to date someone, and I meet them, and I know that my target is like a beautiful relationship with a beautiful house and joy and fun and all of those things. And it's like, you meet someone and you're like, okay, cool. So if I choose to do a relationship with this person, like, does it match the energy that I desire to create? Like, what will my life be like in 5 years? Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that person that you're talking about is the person you're going to meet and marry, and they're going to be the person you have 2.5 kids with, and a dog, and a blue door, and a white picket fence. And that's what I mean. Like, it's not that linear, but you may have a relationship with that person, and you may learn things about yourself, or you may learn things about what you desire in a relationship that you didn't realize before, or you might have awarenesses or experiences that actually move you, I'm going to say towards, even though it's not linear, that move you towards the life that you desire to create. Or you might be like, oh, you know what, actually, I thought I wanted this, and I realized that right now in these 10 seconds, I don't desire that. But again, like, that's not a failure. It's just an awareness. Like, choice creates awareness. And so that's where it's like, it is so much more energetic. It's like you're actually looking forward into the life that you desire to create. And you can say, where will my life be like in 1 week, 5 months, like 50 years? Like, the timeline isn't necessarily important. It's right. More like, does this choice match the energy of the future that I desire to create? And sometimes it's just easier for us to put a timeline on it, but it really is like a yes. It really is a yes, no. Like, does it match the energy? And that's the thing, is you have to know that you know. And we're constantly validated from a very young age to be told what we know, what is appropriate, what isn't appropriate, like, what we're basically invalidated out of our magic. So it's like, and there are a few of us who have really amazing parents that, give us tons of love and empower us and encourage us. And if that's you, congratulations. And if it's not you, like, now, what if now was the time that you actually were willing to have your back harder than ever, and actually willing to acknowledge that you know what is real and what's true for you?
Yeah. Well, and then that goes back to that piece of not judging yourself. So, no matter what is joyful for you, and let's say, whatever it is that you you're choosing something completely different, and it's out of your comfort zone. It's something you've never done. You know, you're jumping off the cliff, and if you fall and, you know, skin your knee or whatever, like where you stay in that space of no judgment of anything. And, you know, it's the energy's coming up again to talk about it, so I'm bringing it up again. And it's, you know, really that's where to be kind to yourself, to be gentle, to be honoring of all of your choices. And what if every single choice you've ever made is part of the path and the, you know, the road that you are taking to wherever, you know, and it's also, is there ever a finish line? You know, or does that finish line keep moving and changing, you know, in height, in perception, and whatever that is. So, you know, if it always is a changing target, you know, as targets or goals are met, you know, and then you're like, okay, now what? Now what can I create? And if you're always that asking for more, reaching for more, creating more, then if you have that kindness and gentleness with yourself, what does that create?
Yeah, and I love that, because it's like, and going back to like where so often we're invalidated, it's like, what if you are the most valuable product in your life? Like, what if you?
I love that.
And it's like, what if you being you is actually the gift that the world requires? Like, what if you being you is actually what's required? And it's, you know, it's something that I talk to a lot of my clients about, the 5 elements of intimacy. And when we talk about intimacy, so often people go to like sex and copulation, but it's like, what if intimacy is actually the first step to communion? And by communion, it's like the connection with every molecule, everything in the universe. Like it's way bigger than the way we use it often, you know, today, where it's like people use that word intimacy more often to talk about relationships. And it's like, what if it's actually way bigger than that? And so when we talk about the 5 elements of intimacy, there's, you know, yes, there is that relationship with other people, but it also starts with you, like you having intimacy with you. And those 5 elements are honor, trust, allowance, gratitude, and vulnerability. And
gosh, kind of a lot of the things we've been talking about today.
I know. I know. Isn't that funny how that works? I know. So it's when you start to look at those 5 elements of intimacy, like that really is like, once you're willing to have that, with you, that's where really all of the possibilities start to show up. And that has been one of like the greatest joys and kind of adventures of my life, is learn to have those 5 elements of intimacy. And I don't know if we can talk about the 5 elements of intimacy, if that would be fun for you.
Sure. I think we need to take our second break, and then when we come back, we can certainly do some more of that. Thank you so much, Paula, for this awesome conversation.
Thank you, Betsy.
Connecting you with the best of the conscious minds in the world. OMTimes Radio. IOM-FM. Host your show on IOM-FM, the radio network of OMTimes Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of OMTimes. Hosting a show on IOM-FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community.
Hello, I'm Lisa Berry. Join me every Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time for Light on Living, a chance to see new, hear different, and feel more as I shine the spotlight on all the ways to lighten the load of life's challenges. Light on Living is your link to that new way you're looking for, that new understanding that will enhance your life, and that positive connection that will support your growth. So join me, and you'll gain insight and start to see things in a new way that motivates you.
Hey, hon, what you doing with your phone? Taking pictures?
No, I'm asking it questions.
Like what?
Hey, Bobo, do flowers have best friends?
I'm sorry. I'm afraid I don't know that.
Hey, follow me. I want to show you something. Look, flowers do have best friends.
Whoa.
Some answers can only be found in nature. Discover the unsearchable. Visit discovertheforest.org to find a trail near you. Brought to you by the United States Forest Service and the Ad Council.
So you guys are listening, as you know, to Imperfect, Brilliance, and thank you so much for tuning in today. I'm Betsy McLoughlin, and if you guys are looking for me, you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, or my website is creatingyumminess.com. And my guest today is Paula Peralta. And I'm just loving this conversation about the joy of failure. And I look back at all the different things in my life that, at the time I thought were failures. And now I'm like, well, what was the, and one of the questions I love asking now is, what was the gift in this? Mm-hmm. And, right, what was the gift? And I can see now so many different things that I thought were either wrong or bad or whatever. And now I look at them and go, well, actually, that road that I talked about where I veered off to the right instead of smacking into different things, like, oh, here's the gift here. And it's almost like an Easter egg hunt where if you're willing to see that gift, how many Easter eggs or chocolate eggs or whatever are you actually missing because you're so focused on what didn't happen? So I'm so enjoying this conversation, Paula. Thank you so much again for being with us. And
oh my gosh, thank you for having me.
I love it. And so we started talking about, before the break, about the elements of intimacy and how that actually plays into the joy of failure and the joy of your life and everything you're creating. So what else would you like to share with everybody?
Yeah, so, as we were talking about, the 5 elements of intimacy are honor, trust, allowance, gratitude, and vulnerability. And I'll just quickly go through those and we can talk about, whatever, if you want to interject, feel free. But the first thing when you talk about honor, it's, and also before actually we go into that, we're really talking about, yes, having the intimacy with, communion that leads to the communion with like every molecule in the universe, but we're also really talking about how having intimacy with you is what allows you to have intimacy with all things. And so when you look at honor, that's really to treat somebody with regard, not with judgment. So, or, to not treat someone with disrespect. And it's like when you go to what you're talking about before, where you have a tendency to make yourself wrong for choices, it's like, is that actually honoring you? Like when you are, when you're choosing to judge yourself, like you're actually not honoring you. So it's like, where can you actually choose to honor yourself? And like you said before, not make yourself wrong for those choices. And also, where can you find gratitude? Like, what is the gift in this? What, how does it get better than this? And what's right about this? And what's right about me that I'm not getting? Is a question that you can often ask when you're looking to get out of judgment with yourself. And that really is honoring of you, is choosing things that are going to celebrate you as the gift that you be in the world.
Mm. Yeah, and it's in each one of these things that we're going to talk about here, they're all intermixed, and, you can't really have just one of these, so
right.
If you're going to choose to have honoring with you, then you can't not have the other pieces of this.
Right.
So what's next?
So next is trust, which is really just like knowing that a person is going to be who they're going to be, and that caring about them is not going to change them. So that's where, like, when we look at ourselves, it's like, so often, like, how often do we make ourselves, like, we try, we set a target for ourselves and then we don't achieve it, or, whatever. I think we see this a lot in people, if they're like trying to change their body or they're trying to, achieve something, like they often will go into the wrongness of them. But it's like people choose to change when they're ready to change and not before then. So it's like, for you, it's like and I think about this, I do this with myself all the time. I'm like, when I'm ready to change, like there is nothing that will stop me from choosing what I actually desire to change. Like there's nothing, no power that can stop me. And the same is true on the other side of that, is like, if I'm not ready to choose and make the choice, like there is nothing that will motivate me. Like it just doesn't matter.
So
like I am fighting an uphill losing battle if I'm not ready to make the choice. And it's like, again, we see this show up in a lot of relationships, but it's like, what if we didn't actually make ourselves wrong for that? And we go into the like, oh, why can't I do this? Why can't I, why can't I stick to my guns on this, goal that I set for myself or whatever that is?
Right.
It's like, what if it's actually not time for you to choose it and you haven't actually, or it's not time for you to change it, or it doesn't need to be changed because you're coming at it from a wrongness perspective, but it's not actually a wrongness. It's like, trust that when you're ready to choose it, if it is not showing up, it's because you have not chosen it. And when you are ready to choose it, it will change. It's that simple.
It's so true. And when you, and it's, again, what are you going to choose, right? So are you going to choose to beat yourself up if you haven't chosen something, or it's like, okay, I'm just not ready. And, so that what would you like to create for your life? What is honoring of you? What is trusting of you? And if you trust that you're going to do it when you're ready, then okay. And it like takes the shackles off of you, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yes. That's like the best. Yes. Like we literally shackle ourselves to what? Like our projections and expectations. But it's like, and that actually leads us perfectly into the next element of intimacy, which is allowance. And that is where there is no point of view. Like everything is just an interesting point of view, and it's not personal and it has no relationship to you. It's just choice. So that's where you're looking at like, okay, cool. This person is choosing this, or I'm saying that this is the energy that I desire to create as my life, but I'm choosing something that necessarily, doesn't match that energy. It's incongruent. It's like, okay, instead of judging yourself, like what if you just said, okay, interesting point of view, I have that point of view, interesting point of view, I have that point of view, and acknowledge that, again, with that honoring, with that trusting of you, like have allowance for what you're choosing, even if sometimes we are cute and not bright and we make choices that don't create the future that we desire, and that's okay. And that, goes right back into gratitude, where it's like, what if you can just be grateful for whoever is showing up, however they're showing up, with no judgment. And again, going back to like gratitude, like where gratitude exists, like judgment cannot exist. It's just, that is the reality of it, is that when you're choosing gratitude, so where can you be grateful for you? Where can you have allowance for you? Where can you honor and trust yourself to create that true intimacy with yourself? It's just a really beautiful thing. And then when you move into that element of vulnerability, which is that fifth element of intimacy, that's really where you're willing to receive anything and everything. And that's where the magic starts to show up. So you're willing to have someone show up, to have yourself show up. You're willing to look at yourself naked in the mirror, lumps, bumps, and bulges, and know that you don't have to prove that like you're perfect or that you've got it all together. You can be there still with no walls, no barriers, like no wrongness, no rightness, and receive it all. And that truly is where the joy of living actually starts to show up.
Yeah. And so again, these are all interwoven, and we're rattling through them fairly quickly, and there are so many layers to this conversation. And for me, I'm way better than I was in all of these different categories. And my target is to be even far greater than I am now, with the intimacy with myself and the intimacy I have with everybody and everything, including the earth, including, nature, including my body. Like, there's to have no separation with anything as one of my targets, really to be that space where there is no judgment, there is no separation. And yes, I'm a work in progress for sure. and when I stumble, like, okay, great, now what can I choose? And, like we've been talking about all along here today, and that has opened up so many different doors for me of possibilities, and as opposed to steel doors barred shut where I didn't have different possibilities and opportunities and things to show up. So you guys, if anything from this conversation today, what if everything you've done, everything you've chosen, what if none of it is wrong? What if none of it is a mistake? What if all of it is just an interesting choice? And if you have that, what could you create now?
I love that. Yeah, and it's like, judgment is a lie anyway. It's an invention, so it's not even real. And failure is a judgment. So it's like, I love what you just said about, like, and not only, like, what if it's not actually wrong, but it's like, what if everything you've actually judged as wrong about you is actually the thing that is strong about you? Like, what if that's actually the strength or the superpower? Like, I was just, I did another interview this morning, and I was talking about, like, the X-Men, right? So I'm not total, like, comic book nerd city, but I know enough. But it's like every movie, every X-Men movie or every superhero movie, it's like when they first discover their talents or their capacities, like, they're a mess. They're blowing things up. They're like putting things on fire. They're like, doing all this crazy stuff on accident because they can't yet control their capacity, right? But if they just stopped right there and were like, well, I'm never going to try to, use this capacity or learn how to use it or whatever that is, like, then they're cutting off what makes them so great. Whereas, like, you start to see, in these, like, franchises or in comic books, like, that's, the original information. But it's like you start to see where, like, they learn to develop their capacities and they learn to function, and they, they then can, navigate society and still be the gift that they be. Whereas if they bought into the wrongness and cut off their capacities, like, that, the world would be completely without their gift. And that's like
such a great analogy. I love that, because you're absolutely right. Like, if they don't start out knowing how to shoot fire out of their hands, they've got to figure it out. And, we go to this place of expecting perfection right out of the gate. So what if we were all of us, every single one, I'm going to challenge all of us, myself included, to let go of that expectation to be perfect. Anybody want to join in with us?
Done. I'm in.
Awesome.
I'm in. Forget about it. But that's the big thing too, Betsy, is it's like, really, like, what if you never slowed yourself down, turned yourself down, or made yourself smaller for anyone?
Yeah. Yep.
Like, what if you, being the, like, superhero that you are of your own life, like, you being you as fast as you are and as amazing as you are, brilliant, like, whatever that, like you said, imperfect brilliance, like, whatever that is, like, what if actually that's the invitation to someone else to tap into what their brilliance is? Like, what if someone's seeing you being willing to outcreate the mistakes or the quote unquote failures? Like, what if that's actually the invitation for them to step up and choose more in their life?
Yeah. That true story. Hashtag true story. And so I wonder what invitation you guys are in your own life that you've never actually stopped and acknowledged, the gift you are, the superpower that you be, the X-Men you are, all the capacities you have. So what would change if you actually started to acknowledge that?
Good question. Good question.
We should start a whole campaign, Paula.
Unlock your inner X-Men. Yeah,
exactly.
Seriously.
And unlocking your inner X-Men, what is your superpower? And really just having fun with playing with it. And I wonder what would unlock for you, unleash for you, and being willing. That the other piece of that, and I know we're almost at the top of the hour, but like being willing to be out of control with it all.
Totally.
Wow. I'm so grateful that you came on. Truly, truly love this conversation. Thank you, Paula, and I hope you'll come back and play with us again sometime.
Oh my gosh, Betsy, I had so much fun. Thank you so much. And hello, everybody. Thank you for listening. And yeah, I can't wait to see what you create out in the world.
Awesome. So what parting words you got for everybody?
Just be you. Be willing to blow some shit up on your way to discovering your superpowers.
All right, you guys. Thank you for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed yourselves. Even if it's a quarter as much as we enjoyed ourselves, we know you had a blast. Thank you so much, you guys. Have a wonderful week. Go blow up the
Betsy.
world, right? All right. Bye, honey.
Thank you.
Bye.